Lucas and Maya never thought a simple online trend could change their lives, but when they found the abandoned house at the edge of town, the door kick challenge became more than a game. Inside, every creak of the floor, every shadow on the wall, and every whisper in the darkness wasn't just a warning, it was a trap. What they thought was curiosity quickly turned into terror, and what awaited them behind the doors was something no one could survive or escape. I never thought a simple online challenge could feel so wrong, so heavy, as if it carried some invisible weight that pressed against my chest. The door kick challenge had been trending for weeks, and at first it seemed harmless. People filmed themselves kicking old doors in abandoned buildings, capturing the sound of splintering wood and the mystery of what lay behind them. Everyone laughed, edited their videos with dramatic effects, and moved on. Everyone except me. I wasn't one for trends, but that night, curiosity gnawed at me, sharper than hunger. There was something about the idea of a door hiding something, some secret waiting to be discovered, that felt irresistible. I wandered the streets until I reached the edge of town, where the streetlights thinned and the darkness became thicker, almost tactile. There it stood, a house that hadn't belonged to anyone for as long as anyone could remember. Windows were shattered, letting in slivers of moonlight that barely touched the floorboards. The wooden door sagged on rusted hinges, its surface marred with deep scratches and stains that were too dark to be water. My phone's flashlight trembled in my hand as I approached, casting unsteady beams across the walls. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but my feet moved forward anyway. The first kick surprised me. The wood groaned like a living thing instead of cracking. It shuddered under my foot, almost as if resisting me. Peering through the edge of the door, I could see a narrow hallway, covered in dust so thick it seemed to float in the air. The house smelled of rotten iron, a metallic Thames that made my stomach twist. My breath came in short, shallow bursts. I stepped inside, and the door swung shut behind me with a dull, final thud that made my heart leap. I turned back instinctively, but the door seemed different. The broken hinges now appeared welded into darkness, almost as if it had never been real. The hallway stretched farther than it should have, or maybe it felt that way because I wasn't meant to be there. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, faded into dull gray and yellow. Small scratches lined the corners, almost like tiny hands had clawed at the walls, marking a desperate path that led deeper into the house. Every step I took was louder than it should have been, echoing in a rhythm that didn't match the dimensions of the hallway. I told myself it was my imagination, that it was just the acoustics, but then I felt a pressure in the air, as if someone was breathing just behind me, and when I whipped around, the hallway was empty. I pressed on, drawn to a door at the end of the hallway that looked different from the others. It was slightly warped, blackened with age, and cold, so cold it made the skin of my hands prickle as I touched it. My hands shook as I raised my foot. Another kick, and the door shuddered violently, but it didn't open. It groaned, deep and guttural, a sound that didn't belong to wood. It was alive, somehow. The air around me thickened, the smell of decay stronger, almost choking. I tried again, harder this time, and the door didn't just resist it, recoiled, rattling in its frame as if struggling against me. I stumbled back, heart hammering. I froze as a faint, wet sound echoed from somewhere above, like fingernails scraping the floorboards, slow and deliberate. I wanted to leave, to turn around and run out into the moonlight, but my curiosity held me rooted in place. And then I saw it, or thought I did. A shadow moved across the top of the staircase, pale and thin, slipping in and out of view. I blinked, and it vanished, leaving the darkness behind it unbroken and silent. I swallowed hard, the fear pressing in like liquid. My phone flickered, and in that moment of dim light, I noticed something impossible. Marks appeared on the floorboards, handprints deep and wet, leading toward me from the first door I had kicked. They weren't mine. They weren't human. They were long, thin, the fingers sharp and elongated, as if whoever or whatever had left them had been trapped inside the house for years, clawing its way toward the world. And then, in a fleeting instant, I realized the door I had entered through was gone. Completely gone. The hallway stretched into darkness, uninterrupted by any exit. My heartbeat rose to a frantic pace, and I knew, in that moment, that the door kick challenge wasn't just a game anymore. It had become a trap. The hallway stretched endlessly, turning and twisting in ways that made no sense. Every corner I rounded brought me back to the same spot, or at least it looked the same: sported leathed floorboards, shadows that clung to the walls like wet cloth. My heart pounded, every beat echoing in my ears, louder than the last. I couldn't tell if the house was shifting around me, or if I was losing my mind, but I felt smaller, trapped, as though the walls themselves were pressing closer. Doors lined the corridor, each one older and darker than the last. Some had deep scratches, others were warped and swollen, and all of them seemed to hum with a faint, almost imperceptible energy. It was a soft whisper at first, so low I thought it was the wind slipping through the broken windows, but it grew louder, like hundreds of hushed voices murmuring just beyond comprehension. They weren't speaking words I could understand. They were calling me, beckoning me forward, daring me to see what lay inside. I found a door on the left that was smaller than the others, oddly delicate and almost childlike, yet impossibly heavy. My hand froze on the knob. The whispers were louder here, urgent, insistent, like something was trapped behind it, clawing at the other side. My foot lifted and slammed against the wood. It groaned, resisted, and then cracked slightly, revealing a sliver of darkness that seemed to inhale my flashlight's beam. A cold shiver crawled up my spine as I pressed again, harder this time, feeling the vibrations through the floor and into my bones. The door swung open slowly, and I braced myself. Inside was empty, or so it seemed. Dust floated in thin beams of moonlight from broken windows I hadn't noticed before. A single mirror leaned against the far wall. I stepped closer, drawn by a force I couldn't name. My reflection stared back at me, pale and trembling. But then I noticed something strange. Behind me, reflected in the glass, was a shadowy figure, thin, unnaturally tall, with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. Its mouth was stretched in a grin so wide it made my stomach twist. I spun around. The room was empty, silence pressed down, suffocating. I turned back to the mirror, and the figure was gone. My hands shook as I reached out to touch the glass. Cold, impossibly cold. It sent a jolt up my arm. Then the scratches appeared, fine lines at first, then deeper, longer, etching words into the surface. You shouldn't have come. My eyes widened. They weren't on the mirror, they were floating in the air, visible only when I stared directly at them. My breath came in sharp bursts, and the whispers seemed to crawl over my skin, brushing against me like cold fingers. I backed away, tripping over the uneven floorboards, and slammed the door shut. The hallway swallowed me again, twisting, turning, and elongating in impossible ways. Every door I passed now seemed to watch me, their surfaces rippling slightly, as though something behind them was pressing its face against the wood. I felt like I was being hunted, not just by what I could see, but by what I couldn't. The air grew colder with each step, the metallic temps of rot stronger. I tried to retrace my way to the entrance, but the hallway had changed. Doors that had been on my left were now on my right, and the staircase at the end seemed to stretch higher, disappearing into darkness I couldn't reach. A low, wet scratching echoed above me again, slow, deliberate, relentless. I forced myself to keep moving, but the sensation of eyes on the back of my neck wouldn't let up. Then I saw something that made me freeze. On the wall opposite me, handprints appeared, pressed deep into the plaster, moving slowly downward as if whatever had left them was crawling, inch by inch toward the floor. They were too long to be human, thin and gnarled, with claws at the tips. My stomach twisted in terror. My legs wanted to move, but my body felt rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. I could feel the cold of the house seeping into my bones, spreading like ice through my veins. I turned slowly, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But then I noticed movement in the shadow at the end of the hall. Something crouched low, creeping along the floor, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. Its shape was distorted, shifting like smoke made solid. I wanted to run, but the floor beneath me groaned and shook, as if warning me that even motion would be dangerous. And then, the whispering grew louder, forming one word I could understand, repeated over and over. Kick, kick, kick. It wasn't just a suggestion anymore, it was a command. And I realized, with sudden, gut-chilling clarity, that the house wanted me to participate. I took a step back, and the door I had just come through slammed shut behind me. I didn't remember touching it. The hallway darkened as if swallowing all light, and in the corner of my eye, I saw something move just out of focus, a figure, crawling toward me, dragging itself across the floor, its nails leaving scratches in the wood as it came. I blinked, and it vanished, leaving behind only a single wet handprint, pressed neatly in the center of the floor, glistening as if it had just been made. The house had become a maze, twisting and folding around itself in ways that made no sense. Every hallway I entered looked the same, yet somehow different, like the walls were moving when I wasn't looking. My footsteps echoed endlessly, and each creak of the floorboards sounded like a warning. I had no idea how long I had been wandering, minutes, hours, maybe longer, but time seemed irrelevant here. The air was thick with rotten cold, curling around my lungs, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to leave. I needed to leave, but the house wouldn't let me. Every door I passed seemed to thrum with life, vibrating subtly under my touch. Some had scratches I hadn't noticed before, deep gouges in the wood like desperate claws. Others were warped and swollen, whispering softly as I walked past. I tried not to listen, tried to tell myself it was my imagination. But the whispers grew louder, clearer. They weren't just sounds, they were calls, beckoning me forward, taunting me, daring me to find the secret hidden within the walls. The house wanted me to continue, and I felt like a puppet being dragged along by invisible strings. I stopped in front of one particular door. Unlike the others, it seemed perfectly smooth and black, absorbing the light from my phone rather than reflecting it. It was unnerving. My hand hovered over the handle. I wanted to turn and run, but something deep inside me, a voice I couldn't control, told me to kick it. One foot lifted, and when it connected with the door, a shudder ran through the floor, through my legs, through my entire body. The door groaned, almost like a living thing, resisting. But then it slowly creaked open. Inside, the room was empty, silent, except for a single mirror leaning against the far wall. I approached it cautiously, my reflection distorted in the dim light. That's when I noticed it behind me in the glass, a shadowy figure crouched low, its eyes hollow, mouth stretched into a grin that shouldn't exist. My heart jumped, my stomach twisted, but when I spun around, the room was empty. I could feel its presence. Though something watching, waiting, the mirror reflected not just me, but something else. Scratches appeared across its surface as I stared, spelling words that I could barely comprehend. Leave now, or join us. I stumbled back, trying to escape the room, but the hallway outside had changed again. It was narrower, darker, and longer. The whispers followed me, growing louder, more urgent. Every door I passed seemed to twitch slightly, like the house itself was alive and aware of my movements. My flashlight flickered, and for a split second, I thought I saw something crouching at the end of the corridor, watching me. I ran, my legs trembling, but the floor beneath me groaned with every step, threatening to give way. Then I saw the footprints. They were small, human-like at first, then elongated, clawed, moving across the floor as if something had crawled upright and was stalking me. My stomach lurched. The air thickened, and I could hear wet scraping sounds above me again, slow and deliberate. The shadows seemed to move independently, sliding along the walls, curling at the corners, reaching toward me with fingers I couldn't see. Panic surged, but I forced myself to keep moving. Each step felt like wading through water, like the house was actively trying to stop me. I stumbled into another room and my flashlight illuminated a single chair in the center. On it was a phone, glowing faintly in the darkness. I approached, hands shaking. The screen displayed a live feed of me walking into the house, but behind my reflection, dozens of shapes moved in the background. Figures, pale and thin, faces twisted in terror, some missing parts of their bodies, frozen in grotesque positions. I recognized them vaguely, people from videos I had seen online, other challengers who had vanished. Their eyes seemed to beg for me to run, but I knew it was too late. As I turned to flee, the whispers rose to a deafening crescendo. My flashlight flickered violently, revealing shapes darting just out of reach, long fingers stretching across the floor, shadows twisting into humanoid forms. The chair was gone, the phone was gone, but something else remained. A single, cold handprint pressed against my chest, leaving a burning mark as if warning me I was next. My pulse thundered in my ears. I backed away, tripping over the uneven floorboards, and fell hard. When I looked up, the wall in front of me had changed completely. A door had appeared, unlike any I had seen before, perfectly smooth, black, and impossible. A low, wet scraping sound began behind it, accompanied by whispers, murmuring my name, repeating a single word, kick. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, the house waiting, patient, hungry, and in that moment, I realized it wasn't just the doors that were alive. The house itself was alive, watching, learning, trapping anyone foolish enough to enter. Every door, every shadow, every whisper had one purpose: to bring you in and never let you leave. My chest tightened, my vision blurred, and as I braced myself to kick the door, I felt the first cold brush of something behind me, a presence, tall and impossibly thin, wrapping its fingers around my ankle, dragging me toward the darkness. I stumbled through the endless corridors, my heart hammering, my lungs burning with every frantic breath. The house had grown darker, colder, heavier, as if it had been waiting specifically for me. Each hallway seemed longer than the last, bending and twisting in ways that made no sense, and every door I passed quivered as though alive. Shadows flickered across the walls, moving in the corners of my eyes. But whenever I looked directly, there was nothing there. Yet I could feel them, countless eyes watching, waiting, whispering, urging me forward. The whispers had changed, now. They weren't just beckoning anymore. They were insistent, aggressive, almost commanding. Kick. Open. Join us. The words crawled under my skin, vibrating in my chest, pressing against my ribs with an unbearable weight. I wanted to fight it, to resist, but some part of me, the part that had drawn me here in the first place, demanded I continue. I had to see what lay behind the final door, the door that had been waiting for me since the moment I stepped inside. I found it at last. Unlike the others, it was perfectly black, smooth, and cold, standing at the end of a narrow corridor that seemed to stretch impossibly far. I approached it cautiously, my hand trembling over the handle. My foot lifted and I kicked. The impact reverberated through my body like a shockwave, and the door groaned as though it were breathing. Slowly, almost unwillingly, it swung open. Inside, the room was deceptively empty. The walls were bare, the floor clean except for a single chair placed in the center. On it lay a phone, its screen glowing faintly in the darkness. I approached, hesitant, but drawn irresistibly. The screen displayed a live feed not of the room I was in, but of myself entering the house. Behind my reflection, I saw the figures. Hundreds of them, pale, thin, twisted, their faces frozen in terror, eyes wide and hollow, mouths stretched into silent screams. I recognized some of them vaguely from videos online, other challengers who had disappeared. My chest tightened, and I wanted to run, but the door slammed shut behind me with a violent force that knocked me off my feet. Panic rose in a wave that made my vision blur. I scrambled to my feet, but when I looked at the chair, the phone was gone. The room was empty again. Only the whispers remained, louder now, closer, surrounding me. "Kick open. Join us." The voice wasn't in my ears anymore, it was in my head, inside my mind, twisting every thought, bending me to the house's will. I backed into the corner, my phone clutched in my hands, flashlight flickering violently. Shadows slid across the walls, moving with a life of their own. I could hear them breathing, wet and rasping, almost hungry. Shapes darted at the edges of my vision, figures I couldn't fully see, their limbs elongated, twisted, reaching toward me. My heart raced, and for the first time, I realized just how deep I had fallen into this trap. The house wasn't just alive, it was aware. Every door, every shadow, every whisper had been waiting for me, studying me, learning how to break me. A soft, wet scraping sound echoed from the floor, and I realized too late what it was. Small, clawed footprints appeared, moving toward me slowly, deliberate, each step leaving scratches and dark stains. I tried to flee, but the hallway had disappeared, replaced by walls closing in, stretching impossibly, corralling me toward the center of the room. I could feel the presence behind me now, pressing against me, its cold fingers brushing my neck, climbing my arms. I spun, but nothing was there, yet the marks it left on the floor glistened, wet and sticky, like blood. I glanced at the ceiling and froze. Shapes hung from above, thin and pale, dangling like marionettes, their eyes hollow, their mouths wide with silent screams. My stomach churned, every instinct screamed to run, but the house had taken control. My legs refused to move in any direction but forward, toward the chair, toward the unseen force orchestrating everything. Then I saw movement at the corner of my agile figure crouched low, dragging itself across the floor, too thin to be human. Its long, clawed fingers left scratches in the wood as it advanced, and its face was me. My face, twisted into a grin, pale and hollow, eyes staring into mine with a silent command. The whispers rose into a deafening roar as the figure crawled closer, and I realized in terror that the house didn't just trap people, it copied them, it used them, it fed on them, and in that instant I understood. I wasn't here to leave, I was here to become. I couldn't run anymore. Every step I took was met with resistance, as if the house itself had grown roots into my legs. The walls stretched farther than they should have, bending impossibly, curling around me, and the whispers had become a deafening roar inside my head. "Kick open. Join us." They weren't suggestions anymore, they were commands, insistent, urgent, filled with a hunger I couldn't comprehend. My heart pounded like a drum, threatening to burst from my chest. I had to move, but every hallway led back to the same center room, the chair in the middle, the unseen force waiting. When I finally stumbled into the room, breathless and trembling, the chair was there, as it always had been. The phone rested on it, glowing faintly. I approached cautiously, my trembling hands reaching out. The screen displayed a live feed of me entering the house again and again, looped as if I had never left. Behind my reflection, the shapes of the previous challengers moved, pale and twisted, eyes wide, mouths frozen in silent screams. Their limbs bent at impossible angles, and some were missing pieces of their bodies. I recognized faces from videos I had seen online, the same people who had vanished. They were here now, trapped in this cycle, feeding the house, becoming it. I wanted to scream, to break the phone, to destroy it, but some invisible force held me in place. My body wouldn't obey me. The shadows that clung to the walls crept closer, twisting and writhing. Shapes darted at the edges of my vision, reaching, clawing, pulling, and then I felt a cold, thin hand wrap around my shoulder, pressing me into the floor. My stomach churned as I realized it wasn't just behind me, it was inside me, crawling under my skin, filling my mind with whispers I could not escape. I turned slowly, my fear turning my stomach to ice, and that's when I saw it. The figure was crouched low, dragging itself across the floor, and the face staring back at my hollow eyes, stretched mouth was my own. My pulse thundered, and the room tilted, bending, shifting. I tried to step back, but the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. It was just darkness now, the chair and the phone suspended in a void that stretched endlessly, the shapes of the other challengers floating around me like marionettes. The whispers in my head grew louder, repeating the same command over and over, until I felt my body moving on its own. I raised my foot, my leg swung forward, my foot connected with the chair, the phone, the air itself, and the world shuddered violently. The shadows convulsed and screamed silently, and for a fleeting moment, I felt as if I had broken free. But the relief was gone almost immediately. The room snapped back into place, the chair empty, the phone gone, the whispers louder than ever. And then I understood. The house wasn't just alive, it didn't just trap you, it replaced you. Every challenger who had come before me gone, consumed, copied, stored within its walls. Every whisper, every shadow, every distorted reflection was part of it, part of the same hunger. And now, I could feel it inside me, reshaping me, bending me toward the house's will. I was becoming something else, something pale, hollow, smiling where I should be screaming. I tried to resist, tried to think, but my mind was no longer my own. The shapes of the previous victims swirled around me, clawing at my vision, whispering in voices that were mine and not mine all at once. The phone reappeared, glowing in the center of the room, displaying a live feed of me twisted pale, hollow-eyed, kicking the air in a loop. I realized in terror that anyone who came after would see this version of me, trapped forever, repeating the same motions, a warning I couldn't communicate. I screamed, but no sound came. My hands reached out, but they passed through shadows that were neither solid nor empty. The figure with my face crouched lower, grinning at me, and I knew, with a horror I could not contain, that I had no choice. The house had me, it would never let me go. And yet, just before everything went dark, I caught a glimpse of the doorway. The hallway behind it had vanished, leaving only endless, black space. Days later, someone found my phone at the edge of town. The screen showed a video, a door swinging open, a shadow stepping out, pale, thin, grinning with hollow eyes, and it looked exactly like me. No one knows where I am now, and sometimes, at night, I hear the faintest sound echoing from my own phone's screen, the soft, wet thud of a foot against wood, the groan of a door resisting, and a voice whispering in my head, "Kick open, join us."